Hi guys, tonight we step quietly into a winter night where cold is not just uncomfortable, but actively hunting for mistakes. You feel it the moment you arrive. The air presses against your skin with intense, sharp and dry, stealing warmth with every breath you take. Snow does not sparkle here for beauty. It lies heavy, absorbing sound, turning the world hushed and watchful. Somewhere nearby, wood creaks, hides rustle, and fire murmurs like a living thing trying to stay awake. You probably won't survive this if you approach it the way modern life trains you to. No thermostat, no extra blanket from the closet, no second chances if you underestimate the night. Here, sleep is not an escape from danger. Sleep is something you must actively engineer. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, I would love to know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights. You step forward into a world where winter defines the calendar, the architecture, and even the shape of rest itself. For native families living in northern and high-altitude regions, winter was not a season you endured casually. It was a long test of planning and cooperation. One broadly accepted historical reality is that entire yearly routines were structured around preparing for these months of cold. Food storage, shelter, repair, clothing, production, and social bonds all funnel toward a single goal: make it through the winter nights alive. You feel how early darkness arrives. The sun drops fast, and with it temperatures follow like a falling stone. You notice how everyone moves with intention. Nothing is rushed, but nothing is wasted. Each action carries the quiet understanding that energy saved now may be needed at 3 a.m. when the fire weakens and the wind rises. Cold here is not just physical, it presses on the mind. Your thoughts slow as your body works harder to stay warm. Modern researchers often point out that sustained cold increases calorie demands dramatically, but what strikes you more is the emotional discipline required. Fear has to be kept small. Panic burns energy faster than shivering. You approach the shelter already sensing that sleep will not be solitary. In many native cultures, winter sleeping was a collective act. Archaeological evidence and oral histories agree that families clustered tightly at night, sharing heat and responsibility. This is not about comfort. This is about survival math. More bodies mean more warmth and more eyes to notice danger. A lesser-known but fascinating detail comes from early European observers who were surprised to see how deliberately cramped sleeping arrangements were. One recorded account describes visitors being uneasy, at first unused to such closeness, until they realized that spacing out could mean frostbite by morning. Privacy, as you know it, is a luxury winter cannot afford. As you lower yourself toward rest, you become aware of how everything smells different in the cold. Smoke clings longer. Animal hides carry a deep, musky warmth. Earth and dried grasses release faint, comforting scents as they heat slowly near the fire. These smells are not background, they are reassurance. You probably assume that sleeping meant lying still for hours. In reality, winter sleep was lighter, more alert. People woke, often listening. The crack of wood shifting, the sigh of wind through snow-packed walls, the breathing patterns of those beside you. Rest came in waves rather than a single long drift. Some anthropologists have suggested that segmented sleep was common in these environments, with natural waking periods built into the night. Others remain unconvinced, arguing that exhaustion would have overridden such patterns. The truth likely varied by region and circumstance, and scholars continue to debate how consistent nighttime waking truly was. You feel the fire nearby not roaring, but carefully controlled. Fires that burn too hot consume precious fuel. Fires that burn too low invited death. Maintaining this balance required skill passed down quietly, often through observation rather than instruction. Children learned by watching hands, not hearing lectures. There is a curious detail preserved in some oral traditions that fires were sometimes spoken to addressed, almost like companions through the night. Whether symbolic or practical, the habit reinforced attention. You do not forget something you treat as alive. As you settle in, clothing stays on. Layers remain exactly where they are. Removing garments for sleep would make no sense here. Everything you wear becomes part of your bedding system. Fur-lined moccasins loosened but not removed. Belts adjusted, hoods positioned to trap warmth without blocking breath. Historians generally agree the hypothermia was a constant risk even indoors. What is less clear is how often it occurred during sleep versus daytime exposure. Records are sparse, filtered through later retellings, but the caution embedded in nighttime routines suggests that sleep itself was considered a vulnerable state. You listen to the night. It is quieter than you expect, but not empty. Snow muffles footsteps, yet amplifies distant sounds. A branch snapping far away sounds closer than it is. Wind scrapes snow across hides like fingers testing a door. Your breathing slows. You match it to those around you, unconsciously syncing rhythms. This shared breathing creates warmth, yes, but also calm. Fear lessens when you're not alone with it. You realize something subtle but important. Winter sleep here is not about dreaming of warmth. It is about staying present enough to wake if needed. Dreams come but lightly. The body never fully lets go. A small but telling practice involved placing the most vulnerable sleepers, infants, and elders closest to the warmest zone. This was not sentimental. It was strategic compassion. Protect those who cannot regulate body heat as effectively. As your eyes close, the cold does not disappear. It waits, but you're not facing it alone. You are wrapped in knowledge refined across generations. Knowledge that understands cold as an adversary you respect, not a monster you fear. Your body settles, half resting, half listening. The fire shifts softly. Someone adjusts a hide nearby. Outside, the night stretches long and patient, and you begin to understand that in this world, sleeping through winter is not a passive act. It is an ongoing negotiation with the cold itself. You do not wake to a new beginning. You simply continue because winter nights allow no clean breaks. Your eyes open briefly, not fully, just enough to register warmth and structure around you. The shelter itself becomes clearer now, not as an object, but as a system designed to resist cold hour after hour. You notice how low everything is. The ceiling presses downward close enough that heat has nowhere to escape. You feel it pooling above you, trapped intentionally. Taller spaces waste warmth. Here, height is surrendered in exchange for survival. This is one of those widely accepted historical realities. Many native winter dwellings were built partially underground or banked heavily, with earth using soil as insulation long before insulation had a name. As you shift slightly, the ground beneath you does not feel frozen. It feels firm, dry, and strangely temperate. That is not an accident. Floors were prepared with layers of bark, packed earth reeds, or grass sometimes topped with hides. The cold earth was never left bare. Contact with frozen ground pulls heat from the body faster than cold air ever could, and people here understood that through experience rather than theory. The walls hold stories too. You sense the thickness of them, layers built not just to block wind, but to slow time. Wind that slips through cracks steals warmth quickly. Walls that absorb and release heat slowly give people a fighting chance. Smoke-darkened surfaces tell you this shelter has seen many winters. Smoke stains were not scrubbed away. They sealed gaps, hardened fibres, and added another thin layer of protection. A small but intriguing detail comes from archaeological digs, where remnants of clay-lined walls were discovered in regions not typically associated with pottery-heavy cultures. Some researchers believe this clay was used selectively in sleeping areas to reduce drafts. Others argue it was primarily structural. The debate continues quietly buried in academic journals, but the outcome feels the same to you now. Less wind, more warmth. You become aware of how the entrance is shaped. It is never wide or dramatic. Often it is low, sometimes requiring crawling. This is deliberate humility imposed by climate. Cold air sinks, warm air rises. A low entrance traps warmth inside like a held breath. Even the direction of the opening matters. Many dwellings were angled away from prevailing winter winds, a practical choice confirmed across multiple regions. You hear a faint sound outside wind pressing against the shelter. It does not rush in. It slides along the surface, frustrated. That tells you the structure is doing its job. Historians still argue whether these architectural choices emerged independently across cultures or spread through long-distance knowledge exchange. What feels certain is that the logic behind them was shared by the land itself. Winter teaches harsh lessons, and it repeats them until they are learned. You shift again, careful not to disturb others. Space is tight by design. Every inch serves a purpose. There is no wasted corner where cold can linger unnoticed. Even storage areas double as insulation, packed with dried foods, tools and bundles that add thermal mass to the walls. Your breath fogs faintly in the dim light, but not excessively. That tells you the temperature inside is holding steady. Not warm by modern standards, but stable. Stability matters more than comfort. A consistent cold can be managed. Sudden drops kill. A curious practice recorded in some oral traditions describes families adjusting wall coverings, seasonally adding or removing layers of hides depending on snowfall and wind patterns. This flexibility suggests that shelters were not static objects, but living structures adapted continually rather than built once and forgotten. You feel the shelter respond to the night. Wood contracts slightly as temperatures fall. Earth holds firm. Snow outside acts as insulation, two piling against walls like an extra blanket. Storms are not only threats, they can become protection once they settle. You listen to the fire again. Its warmth reflects off the walls, bouncing back toward you instead of escaping upward. This containment is intentional. Fire and shelter work as partners. One without the other would fail. There is something psychologically grounding about being enclosed this way. The world narrows to what you can touch, hear, and smell. Fear has fewer places to hide when space is small. You feel held, not trapped. Some scholars suggest that such environments encouraged stronger family bonds simply through proximity. Others caution against romanticizing hardship, noting that stress could just as easily breed tension. Both views may be true. What you feel now is neither romance nor misery. It is focus. As your body relaxes again, you realize the shelter is doing more than blocking cold. It is teaching you how to rest without letting your guard down. The design itself carries memory, the accumulated wisdom of winters survived and winters learned from. You close your eyes, trusting the walls, the floor, the fire, and the quiet decisions made long before you arrived. Outside, the cold presses on. Inside, the shelter holds, and that is enough for now. You do not roll away from others when you sleep. Instead, you move closer, guided by instinct and quiet agreement. Bodies shift subtly, arranging themselves like pieces in a careful pattern. This is not awkwardness, this is design. In winter, sleep becomes a shared structure, just as important as walls and fire. You feel another person's shoulder against your back, steady and warm. A child's small body is tucked between two adults. An elder rests nearest the fire where warmth is most reliable. This arrangement is not sentimental, it is strategic. A widely recognized historical understanding is that shared body heat significantly reduces heat loss during sleep, especially in enclosed spaces. Long before thermodynamics had a name, people here practiced it nightly. Breathing synchronizes in a way you do not consciously notice at first. Slow inhale, longer exhale. The rhythm spreads, calming the group as a whole. Modern sleep science might call this co-regulation, but here it is simply life. You sleep lighter when you sleep together, but you also sleep safer. There is a quiet etiquette to this closeness. Limbs are placed carefully, weight is distributed, so no one is trapped or strained. Everyone knows how to shift without waking the group fully. You learn this by growing up inside it, not by instruction. Mistakes are corrected gently sometimes, with a hand, sometimes with a soft sound, meant only for you. One fascinating detail appears in several early accounts from outsiders who described winter sleeping spaces as crowded beyond comfort. What those observers often missed was how intentionally arranged the closeness was. No one was pressed where cold air could slip in, gaps were filled, warmth was shared evenly. You notice how sleep comes in layers here. Some drift deeper, while others remain closer to waking. Roles are fluid. The person most exhausted sleeps heavier. The one who rested earlier stays lighter, listening for changes in the fire or wind. This shifting awareness is part of the system. Everyone rests, but no one fully disappears into sleep all at once. Historians still debate how universal this pattern was across regions and tribes. Some evidence suggests more segmented arrangements in milder climates, while harsher regions favoured tighter clustering. The land itself likely dictated the rules, adjusting social norms through necessity. You feel the warmth build slowly. Not heat, but something steadier. The cold still exists. You can sense it pressing against the shelter walls. But inside this human cluster, it loses its sharpness. Fingers that would ache alone now rest comfortably against another wrist or sleeve. A quirky detail survives in some oral traditions describing how people could identify family members by touch alone in total darkness. The slope of a shoulder, the pattern of breathing, the way someone always curled their feet. This familiarity turned closeness into comfort rather than threat. You adjust slightly and someone else responds without waking fully. The group moves like a single organism, conserving heat, conserving energy. This is not accidental cooperation. It is learned behaviour refined across generations of winters that punished isolation. There is also an emotional layer to this closeness. Fear does not vanish, but it softens. You are less likely to spiral into anxious thoughts when you feel another heartbeat near your own. Cold magnifies loneliness. Togetherness counters it. Some scholars caution against assuming that communal sleeping was always peaceful. Discomfort, illness, and interpersonal tension certainly existed. Yet the persistence of this practice suggests its benefits outweighed its challenges. Survival has a way of simplifying priorities. You become aware of how sound changes when people sleep close together. Small movements are amplified. A cough is immediately noticed. Shivering is addressed quickly. Someone adjusts a hide. Someone else shifts closer. Problems are handled before they grow. As your eyes close again, you realize that sleep here is not a private retreat. It is a shared responsibility. By staying warm yourself, you help keep others warm too. Your body contributes to the whole, even in rest. The fire crackles softly. Breath rises and falls around you. The cold waits outside, patient but held at bay by walls, flame and the quiet power of human closeness. You drift knowing that if the night changes, you will not face it alone. You stir again, not fully awake but alert enough to notice the fire. It never truly sleeps. It changes, shapes, settles, brightens, then softens again, like a living presence that refuses to abandon you. In winter, fire is not an evening convenience. It is an all-night commitment. Someone rises quietly nearby. You sense it more than see it. A shift of weight. A pause to listen. This person moves with care, already half awake before their feet touch the ground. Tending the fire is not assigned loudly or formally. Responsibility rotates naturally, guided by who slept last and who rested best. Most researchers agree that fires used for winter nights were built differently than daytime cooking fires. They were designed to burn slowly and steadily, using dense wood or carefully chosen fuels that released heat gradually, rather than flaring up and vanishing. You can tell by the way the warmth feels. It is even patient dependable. The fire is not fed casually. Each piece of wood is chosen, positioned, and placed with intention. Too much fuel wastes precious resources and risks sparks. Too little invites cold to creep back in. You realize that knowing how to maintain a night fire is as important as knowing how to build one. You hear a soft breath from the person tending it, a steady rhythm that matches the task. This is learned skill. Children watched this process for years before they were trusted to do it themselves. No instructions were written down. Knowledge passed through hands and repetition. A lesser-known detail appears in some winter camp accounts, describing how fires were sometimes arranged to reflect heat towards sleeping areas using stones, packed earth, or angled walls. This was not about brightness. It was about directing warmth where bodies needed it most. You notice that no one stares directly into the fire for long. It is respected, not admired. Looking too closely risks sparks and distraction. The fire demands attention, but not fascination. There remains disagreement among scholars about how often fires were kept burning continuously through the night versus allowed to die and be rebuilt before dawn. Evidence varies by region and fuel availability. What feels clear to you now is that in the coldest conditions, letting the fire go completely dark was a gamble few were willing to take. The fire crackles softly, a sound that blends into breathing and wind. It becomes part of the night's rhythm. When it shifts tone, someone notices. A sharp snap signals dryness. A dull hiss suggests settling embers. These sounds speak to those who know how to listen. You feel the heat brush your face, then fade as the fire settles again. The balance is delicate. Too much heat dries hides and irritates lungs. Too little stiffens joints and slows circulation. The firekeeper adjusts without thinking, guided by sensation rather than measurement. An unexpected practice, recorded in a handful of oral histories, describes people waking briefly from sleep to check the fire without fully opening their eyes. Hands extended. palms sensing heat, a small adjustment made, then back into rest. Fire, tending, and sleeping overlap, blurring into one continuous act. Some specialists suggest that this constant interaction with fire shaped how people experienced nighttime consciousness, itself keeping the mind lightly engaged even during rest. Others argue that exhaustion would override such alertness. The truth likely depended on the night, the weather, and the people present. You realize that the fire is more than warmth. It is reassurance. Its glow pushes back darkness just enough to keep fear from growing teeth. Shadows move, but they do not overwhelm. The person tending the fire settles back into place. Bodies shift slightly to absorb the renewed warmth. No words are exchanged, none are needed. You close your eyes again, comforted by the soft certainty that someone is watching the fire, and that soon someone else will take their turn. The night continues, but it is managed, monitored, and held in check by quiet hands and shared responsibility. You sink deeper into stillness, becoming aware of what rests beneath and above you. Bedding here is not soft in the way you might expect, but it is carefully layered, each piece chosen for how it traps heat, rather than how it feels at first touch. Comfort grows with warmth, not cushioning. Most evidence points to the use of animal hides as the primary sleeping surface in winter. Deer, bison, elk, and smaller animals all contributed, depending on region and availability. You feel the difference immediately. Fur faces inward, holding heat close to skin. The hide side faces out, blocking drafts and moisture. This arrangement is so intuitive, it hardly needs explanation. Beneath the hides, dried grasses, reeds, or woven mats create separation from the ground. You notice how this layer matters more than you would expect. Cold pulls downward. Anything that lifts you even slightly slows that theft of warmth. Generations learn this through long nights of trial, not theory. A small but intriguing detail emerges from accounts describing how bedding was adjusted nightly. Hides were shaken, rotated, and aired near the fire during the day to remove dampness. Moisture was the enemy. Wet bedding could turn lethal in a matter of hours once temperatures dropped. You adjust your weight, and the bedding responds slowly, molding rather than compressing. This steadiness keeps circulation flowing. Limbs do not fall asleep easily here. Everything is designed to keep blood moving gently through fingers and toes. Researchers continue to differ on how standardized bedding practices were across different native groups. Some evidence suggests highly consistent layering methods, while other findings point to flexible improvisation based on what was available. What feels certain is that bedding was never an afterthought. It was as carefully considered as shelter and fire. You noticed a faint smell of the materials, earthy, clean, slightly smoky. These scents are not distractions. They are signals that the bedding is dry, warm, and safe. A sour or sharp smell would raise concern immediately. One unexpected tidbit survives in several oral histories, describing the use of feathers sewn into inner layers of bedding, not for softness, but for airflow. Feathers trap pockets of air that slow heat loss, much like modern insulation. This practice appears in regions far apart, suggesting independent discovery rather than shared instruction. You pull a hide close around your shoulders. The weight is reassuring, too light, and it would lift with movement, letting cold sneak in. Too heavy, and it would restrict breathing. The balance is learned, not guessed. Some specialists suggest that children learned to identify proper bedding simply by touch, knowing when layers were sufficient without seeing them. Others argue that visual inspection played a larger role. Either way, the knowledge was practical and immediate. Mistakes were felt quickly. You realize that bedding also serves a social role. Shared hides overlap slightly, sealing warmth between sleepers. There are no sharp divisions. Warmth flows across bodies and materials alike. As you settle, you feel how stillness itself becomes part of the system. Excess movement pumps cold air into layers. Calm preserves heat. Even your breathing slows to match this rhythm, careful not to disturb the insulation you have built around yourself. Outside, the cold deepens. Inside, the layered bedding holds quietly doing its work. You drift supported by land animal and skill, woven together through countless winters that taught people how to sleep when cold meant death. You do not undress for sleep. The idea would feel strange here, even reckless. Clothing remains part of your nighttime defense, not something to be set aside. Every layer you wore through the evening stays with you, adjusted rather than removed. There is broad agreement among researchers that winter clothing served double duty, protecting people both while awake and while resting. Garments were designed with flexibility in mind, allowing movement during the day and insulation at night. You feel how this works as you shift. Nothing pinches, nothing binds, everything traps warmth. Soft inner layers rest close to skin, often made from tanned hides or woven fibers that breathe while holding heat. Outer layers remain looser, creating pockets of still air. You sense how the layers cooperate, slowing heat loss without making you sweat. Sweat would be dangerous now. You loosen footwear slightly, but keep it on. Feet lose heat quickly, and numb toes lead to restless sleep. Moccasins lined with fur or grass remain part of the system. You can feel warmth slowly returning to your feet as circulation steadies. An unexpected detail recorded in a handful of winter survival accounts describes people sleeping with their hoods pulled up, leaving only nose and mouth exposed. This was not claustrophobic, it was practical. Heat escapes rapidly from the head, and covering it preserves warmth for the rest of the body. Some researchers remain divided on whether sleeping fully clothed increased comfort or caused stiffness. Evidence suggests that while clothing could restrict movement slightly, the benefits of warmth outweighed the drawbacks during extreme cold. You feel this balance now. Warmth matters more than freedom of motion. Belts are loosened, ties are adjusted, nothing is tight. Tight clothing restricts blood flow, which invites cold. This knowledge is not theoretical. It is felt immediately in aching fingers or tingling skin. A curious practice mentioned in oral tradition involves placing small bundles of dried grass or fur near joints like elbows and knees before sleep. These areas lose heat quickly when bent. Extra insulation there made a noticeable difference by morning. You sense how clothing absorbs the smells of smokehide and earth. These scents are familiar grounding. They signal that garments have been dried properly and are safe to sleep in. Dampness would feel wrong instantly. Interpretations still differ on how often clothing was changed or cleaned during the deepest winter months. Some evidence suggests garments were worn continuously for extended periods, aired near fires when possible. Others argue for more frequent changes than often assumed. What you experience now is simple: clean enough to be safe, dry enough to be warm. You adjust your sleeves, pulling hands inside briefly to warm fingers. This small movement is instinctive. Everyone does it. No one comments. These habits are shared unspoken, learned early. As your body settles again, clothing becomes less noticeable. It stops feeling like something you wear and starts feeling like part of you. Another layer between your warmth and the waiting cold. Breathing slows. The fire murmurs. Layers hold steady. You drift again, wrapped not just in hides and bedding, but in garments shaped by generations who understood that sleep in winter begins with staying dressed. Your stomach reminds you of itself just before sleep, not with hunger exactly, but with expectation. The body knows what is coming. Cold pulls energy from you all night long, and if you begin empty, you will wake shaking long before morning. Eating before sleep here is deliberate. Meals are timed carefully, often later than you might expect, so warmth from digestion carries into the deepest hours of night. People understood this through lived experience. A full belly slows the creep of cold better than an extra layer alone. The food itself is dense and purposeful. You taste fat first, rendered animal fat mixed into stews, dried meat, chewed slowly, grains cooked thick until they cling to the spoon. These are not indulgent flavors, but they're comforting in a different way. They promise endurance. Your body begins turning them into heat almost immediately. You notice how portions are balanced. No one overeats. Too much food draws blood inward, leaving hands and feet colder. Too little leaves nothing to burn. The right amount feels instinctive, learned through winters where mistakes were remembered clearly. Some winter camps favoured foods that digested slowly, releasing energy over hours. Others leaned on whatever stores remained late in the season. The variety suggests that people adapted strategy to circumstance rather than following rigid rules. A small but telling habit appears in several winter accounts, describing how people would linger near the fire after eating, letting the warmth help digestion begin before lying down. This reduced discomfort and helped keep the body from chilling too quickly once movement stopped. There is uncertainty about how universal late-night meals were across all regions. In some places, evidence points to heavier evening eating. In others, food scarcity may have forced smaller portions spread throughout the day. What matters to you now is how carefully this moment is treated. Food before sleep is not casual. It is protective. You drink sparingly. Water is important, but too much invites repeated waking and heat loss. Sips are taken, not gulps. Snow is never eaten directly. Cold inside the body is harder to fight than cold on the skin. You feel warmth bloom slowly in your chest and abdomen. Not sudden, but steady. This internal fire works alongside the one burning nearby. Together they create a buffer that carries you deeper into the night. Children are watched closely during this time. Small bodies burn energy fast. Extra bites are offered quietly without comment. Elders, too, may receive slightly more, recognizing that their warmth fades faster than it once did. Some traditions speak of certain foods believed to strengthen the body against cold beyond simple nutrition. Whether symbolic or practical, these choices reinforced attention to eating as part of winter survival, not just routine. As you settle again, digestion hums softly beneath stillness. Your breathing deepens, muscles loosen. You understand now that sleep here begins long before eyes close. It starts with what you put into your body and how carefully you prepare it for the work ahead. Outside, the cold continues its slow patience. Inside, warmth builds layer by layer, fed by fire clothing, and the quiet strength drawn from a well-chosen meal. You drift, carrying that warmth with you into the dark. As the night deepens, your attention drifts toward the smallest bodies nearby. Children do not simply fall wherever sleep finds them. They're guided, placed, and adjusted with care that looks effortless only because it has been practiced so long. You notice how infants are nestled closest to steady warmth. Sometimes they are placed between adults, sometimes against a chest, sometimes wrapped so tightly that only a soft breath escapes into the cool air. This positioning is not about affection alone. Small bodies lose heat quickly, and everyone here understands that without needing it explained. Older children sleep slightly farther out but never alone. A hand rests near them. A shoulder blocks drafts. They are close enough to share warmth, far enough to learn how to manage their own space. Sleep becomes a lesson, taught quietly, night after night. There is strong evidence from winter camp remains and oral memory that families adjusted sleeping arrangements as children grew. What worked for a newborn would not work for a child learning independence. The night itself became a classroom teaching awareness, restraint, and responsibility. Elders are given similar consideration. Their bodies no longer generate heat as easily, and joints stiffen faster in cold. You see how they're placed where fire warmth reaches most reliably, where waking during the night requires less effort. This is not charity, it is recognition of experience. These are the people who remember which winters nearly failed. A subtle practice appears in several traditions describing how caregivers would check a child's warmth with the back of the hand rather than the palm. The back is more sensitive to temperature changes, allowing quick assessment without waking the sleeper. This small habit speaks to a refined awareness built over time. There is still uncertainty about how often children slept through entire winter nights without waking. Some accounts suggest frequent stirring and quiet comforting. Others imply that exhaustion eventually won out. What feels certain is that wakefulness was expected, not treated as a problem. You hear a child shift nearby a small sound, barely louder than breath. Someone responds instantly, adjusting a hide, drawing them closer. No words are spoken. The correction is gentle and immediate. Children learn early that night is not a time for wandering. Cold waits outside the circle of warmth. Stories told before sleep reinforce this understanding, not through fear, but through familiarity. You stay where warmth lives. As you lie still, you realize that caring for the vulnerable shapes the entire sleeping arrangement. Fire placement, bedding layers, body positions all adjust around those who need the most protection. Strength is measured by how well the group keeps everyone alive, not by individual endurance. This constant attention does not feel heavy, it feels normal. The night passes with small adjustments, barely noticed, each one preventing discomfort from becoming danger. You breathe slowly, aware that somewhere behind you, a child sleeps more safely because of where you are positioned. Your warmth matters. Even at rest you contribute. Outside the cold presses on indifferent. Inside the smallest breaths are watched, guarded, and carried gently through the long hours until morning. As the night settles further, you become aware of a different kind of presence nearby. It is quieter than people, steadier, marked by slow breathing and the occasional shift of weight. Animals share this space too, not as intruders, but as part of the winter arrangement. You sense them before you see them. A dog curled close to the entrance, another tucked near the outer edge of the sleeping group. Their bodies radiate heat, modest but constant. In winter, that warmth matters. People learned long ago that animals sleeping nearby could raise the temperature of a shelter just enough to take the edge off the cold. Across many regions, dogs played this role most often. They were companions, protectors, and practical contributors to survival. Their thick fur and steady body heat made them natural partners in cold nights. You feel how one presses gently against your legs, adjusting only when you move. Other animals are sometimes shared shelter as well, depending on culture and circumstance. In some places, small livestock or working animals were brought into enclosed spaces during extreme cold. This was not done casually. Animals bring smells, noise, and risk. The decision meant conditions outside had grown truly dangerous. There is no single rule that explains when animals slept inside and when they did not. Practices varied widely, shaped by climate, housing type, and social norms. What remains clear is that the boundary between human and animal space softened when survival demanded it. A detail that surfaces in several winter stories describes how dogs were positioned deliberately. They were not allowed to sprawl wherever they pleased. Their bodies blocked drafts near entrances or reinforced warmth along outer sleeping edges. Even animals were part of the design. You notice how the animals settle quickly. They understand this routine. Night is not playtime, it is stillness. Their breathing slows, matching the rhythm of the group. This shared calm spreads easing tension you did not realize you were holding. Some observers in later centuries misunderstood this closeness, seeing it as disorder or lack of hygiene. What they failed to grasp was how carefully managed it was. Animals brought inside were groomed, dried and checked before joining the sleeping space. Wet fur would defeat the purpose. There remains some disagreement about how common this practice was in milder winters versus the harshest conditions. Evidence suggests it increased during storms and deep freezes then receded when temperatures allowed. Flexibility was key. Nothing here is fixed beyond necessity. You hear a low sound from one of the animals, not a bark, just a shift and a sigh. It reassures you. Living beings around you mean warmth is holding. Silence would be more concerning. As you drift again, you realize that winter survival blurs categories. Human, animal, shelter and fire form a single system. Each supports the others. Each depends on cooperation. The dog near your feet shifts closer, and you feel a small pocket of warmth form between bodies. It is not dramatic, but it is enough. Enough to keep toes from numbing. Enough to let sleep deepen another layer. Outside, the cold remains relentless. Inside, life clusters together, sharing breath and heat until morning returns. You notice your own breath now. In the cold, it becomes visible, a faint cloud that forms and fades with each slow cycle. You learn to pay attention to it without staring to sense temperature through breath alone. When the air inside grows too sharp, you know something needs adjusting. Breathing here is not passive. You draw air in carefully through your nose, letting it warm before reaching your lungs. Mouth breathing chills you faster. This is learned young. Anyone who has spent a winter night like this knows the difference immediately. The shelter holds sound in an unusual way. Small noises carry. A shift of hides, a soft cough, a spark popping from the fire. Outside, the world is muted by snow, but inside every sound matters. Silence means stability. Sudden noise means attention. You feel frost forming near the entrance, crystals, collecting where warm air meets cold. No one touches it unless necessary. Breaking frost invites drafts. It is allowed to grow, becoming another layer between you and the night. Time moves differently now. Without clocks, you sense it through the fire's behavior and the quality of the air. When embers settle too low, the chill creeps closer. Someone stirs. A log is nudged. The cycle continues. There are nights when breathing becomes work. The cold tightens the chest, slows circulation. People learn to shift positions slightly, encouraging blood flow without disturbing others. You feel this adjustment happen almost without thought. Some winter stories speak of nights so cold that breath froze inside shelters, leaving a fine dusting of ice by morning. Whether every account reflects reality or memory shaped by hardship is unclear. What matters is that people prepared as if it could happen. You listen to the wind outside. It moves across snow differently than rain across leaves. Softer, slower. It presses rather than strikes. When it changes direction, the shelter responds with new sounds. Walls creak, roof settles. These noises are familiar, not frightening. A small detail you notice is how people position themselves to avoid exhaling directly onto hides or bedding. Moisture from breath can freeze stiffening materials by morning. Faces are angled carefully, scarves or hoods adjusted to guide breath upward or away. The body learns to read these conditions instinctively. You know when to wake enough to act and when to stay still. This balance keeps sleep possible without sacrificing safety. There is no panic in the air, only awareness. Fear burns energy too quickly. Calm preserves warmth. This understanding lives in posture and habit rather than words. As your breathing slows again, the faint clouds grow smaller. The air holds steady. The shelter remains balanced between warmth and cold. You drift listening to breath, fire and wind merge into a single low rhythm. The night continues, but you're still here, breathing, waiting and held. You sense the night shifting not through sound or sight, but through a subtle change in how the space feels. This is when rituals matter most. Not ceremonies in the grand sense, but small repeated actions that steady the mind and protect the body while sleep stays light. Before rest deepens, certain habits are followed without discussion. Hands are warmed near the fire one last time. Bedding is smoothed. Hoods are adjusted. These gestures signal readiness both to yourself and to those around you. Night has rules, and you follow them instinctively. Across many winter cultures, people believed that how you entered sleep affected how safely you passed through the night. Whether interpreted as spiritual caution or practical awareness, the effect was the same. Careful preparation reduced mistakes. Mistakes invited cold. Some families murmured quiet words before sleeping, not loud enough to carry just enough to center breath and focus attention. Others relied on silence itself, letting stillness settle the mind. There is no single pattern. What matters is the pause, the intentional slowing before surrendering to rest. You feel your thoughts narrow. Daytime worries fade. Night demands simpler focus, warmth, breath, awareness. The mind that wanders too far risks missing important signals. A detail mentioned in several winter accounts describes how people avoided certain movements after settling, believing sudden shifts disturbed both warmth and balance. Whether framed as respect for the night or simple efficiency, the habit kept bodies calm and heat contained. Some interpretations suggest these rituals helped manage fear as much as cold. The dark can magnify imagination. Familiar actions anchor you, reminding the body that it has done this before and survived. You notice how children mirror these habits. They quiet more easily, recognizing the pattern. Night becomes predictable, not threatening. Predictability is comfort. There is uncertainty about how much spiritual meaning was attached to these routines versus practical habit. The two often overlap so closely that separating them feels unnecessary. What you experience now is reassurance regardless of interpretation. The fire settles into a steady glow. No one feeds it further unless needed. Too much activity invites wakefulness. Too little invites cold. Balance returns again. You close your eyes, feeling the weight of routine settle around you like another layer. The night is still dangerous, but it is familiar. Familiar danger is easier to manage. Breath deepens, muscles soften. The rituals have done their work, easing you into a sleep that remains alert but calm. Outside the cold waits, inside you're prepared. Sleep comes in fragments, now drifting in and out like low clouds crossing the moon. Dreams do not carry you far from where you lie. They stay close-shaped by the sounds, smells and sensations of the night around you. You dream of movement without travelling, of warmth held carefully in cupped hands, of familiar faces appearing and fading without surprise. These dreams do not pull you away from awareness. They hover just above it, allowing you to return quickly if something changes. Cold seeps into dreams here, not as pain but as pressure. You sense it even while resting. Your body responds without waking fully, drawing knees closer, pulling a hide tighter, angling your breath away from exposed skin. These adjustments happen inside sleep itself. People who have lived through winters like this often describe dreams as shorter and more vivid. The mind does not wander freely when the body must remain attentive. Rest becomes a layered state, neither fully awake nor fully gone. You hear a sound in the dream that matches a real sound nearby. A log settling, wind pressing snow against the wall. The boundary between inner and outer thins. You wake just enough to recognize safety, then drift again. Some traditions speak of dreams as messengers during winter, reflecting the state of the body as much as the spirit. A restless dream might signal cold creeping in. A calm one suggests balance. Whether symbolic or practical, attention to dreams reinforced awareness rather than escape. You feel time stretch. Without clear markers, minutes and hours blur. The night feels long, but not endless. Firelight pulses softly through closed eyes, a reminder that warmth still holds. A subtle habit mentioned in winter stories describes people waking briefly after vivid dreams to check their surroundings, confirming reality before settling again. This kept fear from taking root and ensured problems were addressed early. Your breathing stays slow but shallow, conserving energy. Deep breaths invite heat loss. The body adapts, finding a rhythm suited to the cold. You sense others dreaming too. Small movements ripple through the group. A sigh, a shift, a quiet murmur. No one reacts sharply. Dreams are expected companions here. There is no certainty about how deeply people slept in the coldest conditions. Some nights likely allowed deeper rest. Others demanded vigilance. What you feel now is flexibility, the ability to rest without surrendering awareness. You drift again, dreams folding into sensation folding into rest. The night continues its patient watch. So do you in your own quiet way. The storm announces itself slowly at first. You sense it before it arrives fully through a tightening in the air and a subtle change in how the shelter sounds. Wind begins to press more insistently, not loud yet, but persistent, like a hand testing every seam. Snow follows, not falling so much as moving sideways. You hear it brushing against the walls, building layer by layer. Each gust rearranges the outside world, piling drifts where there were none before. Inside the shelter responds with small shifts and groans. Familiar sounds that tell you it is holding. Sleep becomes lighter now. Not anxious, just alert. Your body recognizes that these are the hours when attention matters most. Storm nights demand cooperation. Everyone senses it. Movements increase slightly. Someone checks the fire more often. Another adjusts bedding to block a draft that was not there before. You feel temperature fluctuate in waves. A gust strips warmth from one side of the shelter, then stillness returns it. The rhythm is uneven but manageable. People have planned for this. Extra fuel is kept close. Hides are layered thicker. Nothing is left to chance when storms arrive. There are stories passed quietly about nights when storms overwhelmed preparation. Shelters collapsed, fires failed. People did not always survive. These stories are not told to frighten children, but to explain why attention matters. You carry that knowledge now, feeling it sharpen your awareness. The firekeeper wakes more often during storms. Wind can pull heat away faster, than expected. Embers are coaxed gently, never rushed. Too much flame risks sparks carried by sudden drafts. Too little invites cold to settle deep into the shelter. You notice how bodies press closer together without discussion. Gaps are closed instinctively. Shared warmth becomes more important as the outside world grows harsher. Breathing synchronizes again, calming nerves and conserving energy. Snow acts strangely here. Outside it is threat and protection at once. As it piles against the shelter, it adds insulation, muffling sound, and slowing heat loss. You listen as the world grows quieter under its weight. Sleep comes in short stretches. You drift, wake, adjust, drift again. This pattern feels normal. The storm sets the pace and you follow it rather than resist. Some people remember storms as the longest nights of winter. Others recall them as strangely comforting, knowing that no one would travel, no threats would approach, and everyone would remain together until morning. Both feelings can exist at once. You wake briefly to the sound of snow sliding off part of the roof. It startles, then reassures. The shelter sheds weight as designed. Someone exhales slowly nearby. No further action is needed. As the storm continues, fear never fully takes hold. Familiar routines anchor you. Hands know what to do. Bodies know where to be. The night is dangerous, but it is not chaos. Eventually, exhaustion softens vigilance. You drift again, wrapped in sound, warmth and movement. The storm rages outside, but inside life holds steady, waiting patiently for morning to arrive. You wake again, not because something is wrong, but because it is time. The fire has slipped lower, not dangerously, so just enough to change the feel of the air. Your body recognizes the signal before your thoughts catch up. Someone rises quietly, joints stiff from cold and stillness. You hear the careful movement, slow and deliberate. Night waking is expected here. It is built into the rhythm of winter rest. No one resents it. Waking keeps everyone alive. The fire is fed with patience. A single piece of wood is added, then another only. After the first settles, sparks are watched closely. Wind from the storm outside can draw flame unexpectedly. Experience guides each movement, learned over years of watching what works and what fails. You stay still, conserving heat while the warmth rebuilds. This is another lesson learned early. Moving unnecessarily at night costs energy and invites cold. Trusting others to handle the fire is part of the agreement you all share. In some winters, people remember waking so often that sleep felt like a series of short visits rather than a long stay. Other nights allowed longer rest. Conditions decided. Flexibility mattered more than routine. The person tending the fire pauses, listening. Fire speaks softly. A crackle means dryness. A dull glow means embers settling. These sounds are read like signals, not noise. You feel warmth return, gradually starting near the fire and spreading outward. Fingers loosen, breath deepens, muscles release their guarded tension. The system resets. A small habit appears here that many people follow without thinking. After tending the fire, the person warms their hands, then places them briefly on someone else's shoulder or back before settling in again. This shares heat and signals that things are stable. There are memories of nights when fire tending became exhausting, when fuel ran low and choices grew harder. Those memories shape how carefully wood is stored and rationed. You feel that caution, even now, in how little is used to achieve enough warmth. You drift again as the fire settles. Sleep returns slowly, gently. Waking has not shattered rest, it has preserved it. Outside, the storm begins to weaken, wind softens, snow falls more quietly. Inside, warmth holds steady once more. You rest knowing that if the fire shifts again, someone will rise. And if that someone is you, you will move just as carefully, just as quietly, carrying the night forward until morning. As the night stretches on, you feel how knowledge itself becomes a source of warmth. Not physical heat, but reassurance that settles the body and steadies the mind. What you are doing now has been done before many times in winters that tested people just as hard. Lessons live in small gestures. The way someone checks the fire without waking fully. The way bedding is layered thicker near the ground. The way children are taught to notice cold creeping in before it bites. None of this is taught in a single moment. It accumulates night after night, winter after winter. You remember being shown how to listen for changes in the shelter, a new whistle in the wind, a deeper creak in the walls. These sounds mean something. They tell you when to act and when to stay still. Learning them takes time. Missing them once is usually enough to remember forever. Older voices carry these lessons forward, not through lectures but through stories told during calmer seasons. Stories about winters when snow came early, or when food ran low, or when someone survived because they noticed one small detail in time. These stories are practical even when they sound gentle. You sense how knowledge is shared without hierarchy. Anyone who notices something speaks up. Age brings experience, but attention matters more than authority. Survival depends on listening, not rank. Some winters leave deeper marks than others. People remember the cold that reached farther inside than expected, the nights when sleep came hardest. Those memories shape how future winters are approached. Extra preparation, extra caution. You feel that weight now carried quietly. Children absorb this knowledge simply by being present. They watch, they imitate, they feel the consequences of small choices. No one needs to explain why certain habits matter. The cold explains it clearly enough. You drift between rest and awareness, comforted by the sense that you're not guessing. You are following a path worn smooth by countless steps before yours. The fire breathes steadily. The shelter holds. Outside, the cold continues its long watch, but inside, knowledge stands guard just as surely as flame or fur. You sleep again, carried by the understanding that survival is not only about strength, but about remembering what others have already learned for you. The night carries roles with it, even while everyone rests. You sense them shifting gently as hours pass, not fixed assignments, but responsibilities that move to whoever is most able in that moment. Winter does not reward rigid thinking. It rewards awareness. Some tasks fall naturally to certain people. Those who wake easily tend to listen more closely. Those who sleep heavier are allowed to do so, trusted to restore strength for the coming day. No one announces these roles. They reveal themselves through habit and need. You notice how hands move differently in the dark. Someone who has fed the fire many times does it almost without looking. Another person checks bedding edges, smoothing folds where cold air might slip through. These actions are quiet, practiced, and unremarkable, which is exactly why they work. Responsibilities are shaped by ability rather than expectation. Strength matters, but so does patience. Attention matters, but so does endurance. You see how people shift between roles over the course of a winter, adapting as bodies change and conditions demand. In some families, certain night tasks are learned earlier by those who show interest rather than by age alone. Curiosity becomes preparation. Watching closely becomes competence. By the time responsibility is needed, it already feels familiar. There are nights when illness or fatigue changes everything. Someone who usually tends the fire sleeps deeply, and another takes their place without complaint. Cooperation here is flexible, not heroic. Survival depends on this quiet adaptability. You feel how trust threads through the night. You stay still because you know someone else is listening. You sleep because you know warmth is being watched. This shared confidence allows rest to deepen even when danger remains close. Stories from calmer seasons sometimes describe disagreements about how tasks should be done. Winter nights leave little room for that. Results matter more than preference. What keeps the shelter warm stays. You drift again, knowing that if your body stirs before thought, you will rise without resentment. Not because it's expected of you, but because this is how the night continues safely. Outside, the cold remains unchanged. Inside, rolls flow gently from one person to the next, carrying everyone forward together until morning light returns. The night feels heavier now, not colder exactly, but more fragile. This is when sickness becomes most noticeable. A cough sounds sharper. Breathing grows uneven. Someone shifts too often, unable to settle. Cold has a way of finding weakness and pressing there. When illness appears, sleep changes shape for everyone. You stay lighter. Listening becomes constant again. Warmth is managed more carefully, directed toward the body that needs it most. No one pretends the night will take care of itself. A fever is dangerous here, but so is chill. The balance is delicate. Too much heat can exhaust an already weakened body. Too little invites shaking that drains strength. Hands check skin quietly. Foreheads are felt with the back of the hand. Adjustments are made in small steps. You notice how the fire is kept steady rather than strong. Gentle heat supports recovery better than sudden bursts. Bedding is layered to allow regulation. A hide loosened, another added. Everything remains adjustable. There are memories carried about nights when sickness turned serious. Those memories shape how quickly people respond now. Waiting is risky. Attention is safer. Even sleep becomes a form of care taken in turn so someone is always aware. Children sense this shift immediately. They quiet without being told. Movement slows. The night grows focused. You feel the seriousness without panic. Calm helps the sick body rest. Some remedies are practical. Warmth, hydration in careful sips. Positioning that eases breathing. Others draw from long-held belief, offered with equal care. Whether they work through body or mind matters less than the comfort they provide. You hear someone murmuring softly, not words meant to be understood, just sound meant to soothe. Rhythm steadies breathing. Familiar voices anchor awareness. Fear drains energy that the sick cannot spare. Sleep comes unevenly now. You drift, wake, listen, drift again. The night feels longer but purposeful. Every small action contributes to keeping one person through until morning. By the time rest returns more fully, the worst has passed for now. Breathing steadies, shivering lessens. The group relaxes slightly, though vigilance remains. You close your eyes again, knowing that winter nights are not only about keeping yourself warm, they're about holding one another through vulnerability when warmth and attention become medicine, and sleep itself becomes an act of care. The night sky still matters even when you cannot see it. You feel its presence through changes in temperature, through the way the wind settles or rises through the faint pull of time that moves without clocks. Sleep here listens to the world above as much as the one around you. You sense when the moon shifts behind clouds. The darkness grows thicker and the shelter feels more enclosed. On clearer nights, moonlight filters faintly through gaps and smoke holes, painting pale shapes that drift across the walls. These changes are subtle, but they guide expectation. You know when the night is still young and when it has begun to thin toward morning. People here measure time through pattern rather than precision. The fire has its phases, the cold deepens, then eases slightly. Winds often settle before dawn. Your body learns these rhythms, waking briefly when change is likely, resting longer when stability returns. Long familiarity with stars once helped people judge the length of winter nights, even from inside shelter. The angle of certain constellations before sleep hinted at how long the darkness would last. Over generations, this knowledge became instinct. You feel it now as patience rather than calculation. Some nights feel endless, others pass quickly. Perception shifts with fatigue and weather. What remains steady is the understanding that morning always arrives differently in winter. It creeps in slowly, announced first by a change in cold rather than light. You notice that people stir more as the night approaches its end, not from alarm but anticipation. Fires are prepared for the morning chill, bedding is adjusted again. The body begins to prepare for movement before the mind fully wakes. There are stories of nights where stars vanished completely behind storm clouds, leaving people to rely only on sound and sensation to mark time. Those nights are remembered as disorienting but survivable. The body adapts when familiar markers disappear. You breathe steadily, aware that the cold has stopped intensifying. That alone tells you something. The worst has passed. Dawn may still be hours away, but the night has turned its corner. Sleep deepens again, heavier, this time carried by the quiet assurance that time is moving forward. The sky, unseen but felt, continues its slow arc overhead. You rest trusting rhythms older than memory, knowing that even without light, the world is still turning toward warmth. As the night wears on, you feel the quiet pressure of scarcity. It does not announce itself loudly. It sits in the back of the mind, shaping choices without ever needing to speak. Every movement, every adjustment of fire or bedding carries the understanding that resources are finite. You sense it in how carefully wood is handled. No piece is wasted. Even the smallest fragments are saved tucked close for moments when they might matter most. Food stores are not thought about tonight, but their presence influences how calmly everyone rests. Knowing there is enough allows sleep to deepen. Uncertainty keeps it shallow. Mental strength matters here as much as physical warmth. Panic drains energy. Despair invites mistakes. People learn early to keep thoughts narrow during winter nights. Focus on what is close, what is warm, what is steady. The future can wait until morning. There are nights when the cold tests resolve more than preparation, when fire struggles, when wind finds new paths. On those nights, endurance comes from routine. Familiar actions calm the body. Repetition keeps fear from growing too large. You feel this steadiness now. Even though the night is long, it does not feel overwhelming. You trust the systems in place. You trust the people around you. Trust itself becomes insulation. Stories remembered from difficult winters often emphasize attitude as much as strategy. People who stayed calm conserved energy. People who believed the night could be managed acted more effectively when problems arose. Confidence here is quiet, built from experience rather than bravado. You notice how no one speaks about scarcity directly during the night. There is no counting or worrying aloud. Such thoughts belong to daylight planning. Night is for rest and maintenance. Separating the two keeps the mind from spinning. Sleep comes again, not deep but steady. The body rests because the mind allows it to. Strength gathers quietly, ready for whatever the morning brings. Outside, the cold remains indifferent. Inside, resilience holds its ground, shaped by habit, trust, and the quiet decision to endure. The way you sleep through winter depends deeply on where you are. You feel that truth now, as if the land itself is reminding you. Cold is not the same everywhere. It behaves differently across forests, plains, coasts, and high ground, and people learn to sleep according to its local habits. In wooded regions, the cold feels damp and persistent. It clings rather than cuts. Shelters there are packed tighter, lined thicker, built to block moisture as much as wind. You notice how bedding feels heavier, how fires burn slower to keep air from becoming too dry. Smoke hangs longer, sealing small gaps over time. On open plains, the cold moves faster. Wind becomes the primary threat. You feel how shelters there are shaped low and rounded, offering as little surface as possible to passing gusts. Sleeping positions adjust accordingly. Bodies turn away from expected drafts. Outer edges are reinforced with extra layers and weight. In higher elevations, cold arrives early and leaves late. Nights stretch longer. You sense how people here sleep with greater patience, accepting that winter claims more of the year. Fuel is guarded closely. Fires are smaller but constant. Sleep becomes lighter by habit, ready for long vigilance. Near water, cold behaves unpredictably. It can soften suddenly or sharpen without warning. Moist air seeps into everything. You feel the extra care taken to keep bedding dry, to elevate sleeping surfaces further from the ground. Dampness is watched as closely as temperature. These differences shape more than shelter. They shape expectations. In some places, waking often at night feels normal. In others, longer stretches of rest are possible once systems are set. No single pattern defines winter sleep. Adaptation does. You realize how people learn these differences not through explanation, but through experience. The land teaches. Mistakes are corrected quickly. Habits form that feel obvious once learned, even if they would fail somewhere else. As you rest, you sense the particular cold of this place pressing against the shelter. You adjust without thinking, following rules written not in words but in muscle memory and shared practice. Morning will look different elsewhere. So will night. Here, this way of sleeping fits the land that surrounds you, and for now, that fit is what keeps you alive. The cold does not always give warning. Some nights change, suddenly catching even careful people off guard. You feel that possibility now resting beneath layers that were chosen for a calmer evening. A shift in wind, a drop in temperature, and plans must change quickly. When this happens, improvisation takes over. Nothing dramatic, no panic, just quiet problem solving carried out with practiced hands. Someone adds an extra hide that had been kept nearby for this very reason. Another person adjusts the fire slightly, not stronger, just steadier. You notice how people keep certain materials within reach while sleeping. Extra grass bundles, spare fur pieces, a length of bark. These items are not clutter, they are contingency. You do not want to search in the dark when fingers are already stiff. The shelter responds too. Snow may be pulled closer to the walls, from inside packed gently, where drafts begin to creep in. Openings are narrowed. Weight is redistributed. The structure tightens itself against the night. You sense the shift in the group's energy. Sleep lightens, attention sharpens. Everyone becomes a little more awake without fully rising. This shared alertness allows small problems to be solved before they grow larger. There are nights remembered for how quickly they turned. Warmth that held at dusk failed by midnight. People survived those nights because they adapted, not because they followed a fixed plan. Flexibility mattered more than perfection. You feel your own role adjust. Maybe you shift to block a draft with your body. Maybe you offer warmth where it is thinning. These contributions feel instinctive, guided by awareness rather than instruction. Eventually, the cold settles into its new pattern. Adjustments prove sufficient. The shelter holds again. Sleep returns gradually earned rather than assumed. You drift back into rest, knowing that winter does not reward complacency, but it does respond to attention. Even when plans fail, presence can still carry you through the night. Before sleep settles again, voices return softly. Stories emerge the way warmth does, slowly, carefully offered, rather than announced. They are not performances, they are tools. In winter, words serve a purpose beyond passing time. You listen as someone begins a familiar tale, one you have heard before, but never exactly the same way, twice. The details shift slightly, with each telling shaped by the night, the weather, and who needs comfort most. These stories do not distract you from the cold. They help you stay calm within it. The voice stays low and even. Loud speech would waste breath and stir too much movement. Rhythm matters more than volume. The story unfolds at a pace that matches breathing, easing tension, and guiding the body toward rest. Children listen with wide attention at first, then gradually relax. Familiar scenes reassure them. Known endings promise safety. Stories become a bridge between wakefulness and sleep, easing the mind into stillness without sudden silence. Adults listen too, though differently. For them, stories reinforce memory and belonging. They remind you that others have faced nights like this before, that survival is not accidental, it is remembered. Some stories explain how certain habits came to be, why fires are built a certain way, why certain places are avoided in winter. These explanations slip into narrative rather than instruction, making them easier to carry forward. You notice how the storyteller watches the group adjusting cadence when someone shifts or sighs. The story responds to the room, not the other way around. When rest deepens, words grow fewer. There are moments when the story pauses completely, leaving only fire and breath. Silence becomes part of the telling. No one rushes to fill it. Eventually, the voice fades. The story ends not with a clear conclusion, but with quiet acceptance. Sleep follows naturally, not forced, not abrupt. You rest again, carried by shared memory and gentle sound. The cold remains outside, but inside stories have done their work, steadying minds and knitting the group together through another stretch of night. You wake slowly, not because the night has ended, but because your body needs reassurance. This moment before dawn carries a particular tension. Cold settles deepest now, when fire has burned longest and rest has thinned awareness. You begin checking without fully rising. Fingers move first, toes curl inside their layers. You notice sensation returning easily, a good sign. Stiffness loosens rather than sharpens. These small signals tell you that the night has not taken too much. Others do the same. No one speaks, but movement ripples gently through the group. Someone stretches an arm, another shifts a leg. These quiet tests confirm that circulation still flows. Attention turns briefly to the fire. Its glow is low but alive. Enough heat remains to hold the space until morning tasks begin. No one rushes to feed it yet. Morning will bring activity and warmth through motion. Night demands restraint. You listen for breath around you, steady, even. No harsh sounds, no shivering that needs immediate response. The shelter feels balanced, holding just enough warmth to get everyone through the final stretch. There are nights remembered when this check revealed danger. Fingers numb beyond recovery. Breath too shallow. Fire gone dark. Those memories sharpen this moment, making everyone careful without making them afraid. You notice how elders are watched most closely now. The longest nights take the most from them. A small adjustment is made. A hide pulled closer. A shoulder offered. Support arrives quietly. Children stir as well, blinking sleep away. They're guided gently back into warmth. Morning excitement waits, for now rest matters more. The sky outside has begun to change, though you cannot see it yet. The cold feels different, less aggressive, more settled. This tells you that dawn is approaching, even if light remains hidden. You breathe deeper now. Muscles relax. The worst is past. Survival has carried through another night. Sleep returns one last time, lighter but peaceful, holding you just long enough for the world outside to begin turning back toward warmth. Morning does not arrive all at once. It announces itself gradually, through subtle shifts you feel, before you see anything change. The cold loosens its grip just slightly. The air inside the shelter feels less sharp, more forgiving. This is how you know the night is finally releasing you. People begin to move more freely now. Joints stretch, back straighten. The stiffness of hours spent holding warmth gives way to cautious motion. You sit up slowly, careful not to rush blood back into limbs that have rested too long. The body remembers these transitions and handles them patiently. The fire receives new attention this time, without the restraint of night. More fuel is added. Flames brighten. Heat spreads quickly through the shelter, welcomed rather than rationed. Smoke lifts and finds its way out, carrying the smell of another survived night with it. You notice how everyone checks one another openly now. Faces are studied in the firelight. Colour returns to cheeks. Eyes meet and linger for reassurance. No words are needed. The group reads itself instinctively. Outside, the world has changed. Snow lies where there was none before. Drifts reshape paths and landmarks. You feel the weight of that knowledge even before stepping out. Winter mornings demand assessment before action. People prepare carefully. Clothing is adjusted again, this time for movement rather than stillness. Bedding is shaken out and hung where it can dry. Moisture that gathered overnight must be driven away before it causes trouble later. There is a quiet satisfaction in these movements. Not pride exactly, but relief grounded in reality. Another night has passed. Systems held. Knowledge proved itself again. Some winters blur together in memory. Others stand out sharply. Morning rituals help anchor these experiences, turning survival into routine rather than ordeal. You take a deeper breath, now lungs expanding fully for the first time since darkness fell. The air still bites, but it no longer feels like a threat waiting to strike. The day ahead will bring its own challenges. For now, the night is complete. You have slept through cold that once meant death, carried by shared effort, attention, and care. You carry the night forward with you, even as daylight strengthens. Winter sleep like this leaves marks that linger beyond morning. The body remembers how carefully it was held, how awareness never fully faded, how warmth was shared rather than assumed. As you move through the early hours, sensations return gradually. Fingers regain full feeling. Shoulders loosen. Breath deepens without effort. These changes arrive quietly, but they mean everything. They tell you that the systems worked, that attention and cooperation carried everyone through. You notice how people speak differently after a hard night. Voices stay low, movements remain measured. No one rushes into the day. Winter teaches patience, and that lesson does not vanish with sunrise. Memories of nights like this become reference points. Long after the season ends, they guide preparation for the next cold. Where to build, how much to store, which habits cannot be skipped. Sleep becomes part of collective memory, not just personal experience. Children absorb these memories without realizing it. They remember how warmth felt when it mattered most. They remember waking safely. These impressions shape how they approach cold for the rest of their lives. Elders carry quieter memories. They recognize patterns repeating, storms that resemble older storms, cold that behaves in familiar ways. Their calm reassures everyone else. Survival feels possible because it has been before. You realize that sleeping through winter here was never about defeating the cold. It was about living alongside it, accepting its presence, respecting its power, responding rather than resisting. The land does not change its rules, people adapt. That adaptation lives in shelters, in fires, in bedding, in food, and in the way sleep itself is practiced. Rest becomes active. Awareness becomes gentle. Fear is kept small. As the day unfolds, night recedes into memory, but it does not disappear. It becomes instruction. It becomes reassurance. It becomes proof that warmth can be built, even when the world offers none freely. You move forward carrying that knowledge, understanding now that sleep in such winters was never passive. It was earned, protected, and shared. And as the rhythm of the day settles in your body, finally releases the last traces of vigilance, warmth feels easier now. Breath flows freely. Muscles soften fully. You let yourself rest again this time without listening so closely, knowing that for this night, at least survival has already been secured. The memory of winter sleep fades gently, leaving behind a quiet respect for those who mastered it, and a calm awareness that even in the harshest cold rest was possible. Now the night loosens its hold completely. The images soften. Firelight dims behind closed eyes. Breath slows into an easy, familiar rhythm. The shelter, the cold, the careful arrangements all drift into the background, no longer urgent, no longer sharp. You feel safe enough to let go. Thoughts stretch and then dissolve. Like frost melting in early light, the world becomes quieter, simpler. Nothing is required of you now. No listening, no adjusting. Just rest. Your body remembers warmth and carries it inward. Muscles sink, shoulders release, jaw unclenches. Each breath takes a little less effort than the last. If your mind wanders, let it. If it slows, allow that too. There is nowhere you need to be. Morning can wait. The long winter night has passed. You are here. You are warm enough. You are at ease. Sleep comes gently, now without vigilance, without effort, like settling into still water. The night loosens its grip now. The work of staying warm is finished, and your body senses that it can finally rest without listening so closely. Muscles soften in small stages, as if they are remembering how to let go. Your breathing slows, deepening naturally, no longer shaped by caution or cold. The images of firelight, shelter walls, and shared warmth begin to blur at the edges. They're still there, but they no longer ask anything of you. The cold that once pressed so hard feels distant now, like weather remembered rather than endured. You feel the weight beneath you steady and supportive. Nothing shifts, nothing demands attention. The world has narrowed to breath and warmth, and even those begin to fade into the background. Thoughts arrive more slowly, and when they do, they drift away just as easily. There is no need to follow them. The night has already taught you what you needed to know. Survival has been carried through. Morning will come when it is ready. Your hands relax, your jaw unclenches, the quiet spreads inward, settling somewhere deep in the chest. Each breath feels softer than the last, as if sleep itself is drawing closer without urgency. You are safe enough now to sink fully into rest. No listening, no watching, just stillness. Let the last traces of the night dissolve. Let the warmth remain. Sleep takes over gently, like a familiar blanket pulled up without waking you. Nothing more is required. Sweet dreams.